While the president met with Democrats on the same debt ceiling issue. That, of course, was a far more agreeable meeting. Ohio Democratic Congressman Dennis Kucinich was there then and is here now. Congressman Kucinich, it's always a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch. What happened today when the president met with Democrats and representatives? Did they talk about Paul Ryan? Did they talk about Medicare? Did they talk about raising the debt ceiling? Did they talk about an illegal war in Libya?
We talked about protecting Medicare. We talked about raising the debt ceiling. There was no discussion on the war in Libya. There was a discussion brought up by Mr. McGovern on the war in Afghanistan. There's things that really haven't been resolved in that regard. But I will say this, that the president did say, and I agree with him on this one point, we don't want the United States to default. The full faith and credit of the United States should not be damaged. I have issues with war spending. I have issues with the tax cuts. And of course, the recession's impact. So we've got to be careful that while we're debating our economy and the debt, that we don't put America in a position where we can't even control our financial destiny anymore.
You know how much I respect your thinking, Congressman. This happens to be an area on which we have a disagreement. So let me ask a couple of questions. Do you really want to add $2.4 trillion to the $14.3 trillion that we already owe, with no means or intention of ever paying it back other than by rolling it over and borrowing more money in the future?
I don't want to borrow more money. What I want is for us to take control of the money system again by putting the Fed under Treasury and have the government be able to invest money instead of the Fed loaning money to banks or creating money out of nothing and giving it to banks, which then park it at the Fed and gain interest with no benefit to the economy. I want to see money spent to create jobs, rebuild America. We shouldn't have to borrow this money.
But
I have a different approach.
You know
Judge.
that if the debt ceiling is raised, and I think you'll probably vote for it, that the Treasury Department will go right up the block to Uncle Ben, to the Federal Reserve, and say, okay, we need $1 trillion. Print it for us.
I have a concern about the policies of the administration. You and I may share many of the same concerns. But I have, the way the rules of the game are right now, that if the United States defaults on any of its obligations, that we then end up have skyrocketing additional costs in the bond market, that we then could set off a wave of tax by other creditors.
What's wrong?
I don't like the way the economy is being managed right now.
All
we
right,
should be
but
creating jobs.
you admit that we bit off more than we can chew. You admit that we're borrowing money in order to pay the interest on the money we've already borrowed.
Worse than that, we're borrowing money for wars that we shouldn't have been in. We're borrowing money for tax cuts we didn't have the money to give. We're borrowing money to help paper over a trade deficit, which helps to take our jobs out of the country.
And yet you, Dennis Kucinich, one of the few members of Congress who understands the Federal Reserve, want us to borrow more, and the money's going to come from them, and it's going to devalue what we already have.
This guy wants to change the rules so that we diminish the role of the Fed, put it back under Treasury, which the founders intended under Article 1, Section 8. The power to coin money was not given to the Fed. The
Correct.
Fed seized that power in 1913. I want to set the Fed aside as far as that's concerned, regain the power, let the government invest in the economy. We don't have to why should we borrow money from banks? The Fed is giving money to the banks. We shouldn't have to borrow money from banks.
Switching gears before we go, was there any conversation today with the president that he missed his 60-day obligation under the War Powers Act, that he's still conducting a war that he says he started under the War Powers Act in Libya, and he hasn't asked Congress for permission to continue?
No, there wasn't that discussion. There were a lot of questions raised about the economy. I wish that I'd have gotten a chance to ask the question about Libya, but I will say this. Tomorrow, the Congress is going to take the first step that we've taken to directly address our disposition in Libya. John Conyers last week had the amendment that almost a unanimous agreement, no ground troops. But let's face it, NATO is already saying they want another 90 days of war. NATO is about ground troops. If the United States Congress doesn't weigh in and insist that Article 1, Section 8 provides the Congress has the power to decide whether to go to war, then what happens is that this Constitution, a document I love,
is meaningless.
This Constitution just gets meaningless. And we have to, this is about standing up for the Constitution. That's what I came here to do, and I'm going to do that.
Got it. Congressman Kucinich, we know you had a busy day. We very much appreciate you joining us. Thank you as always.
Thank you.